Hey, good afternoon and welcome. If you'd like to put on the headphones, it'll really help. They should all be red. If they're red, you'll hear me. If they're not red, you're going to hear somebody else. Once you have the headphones on, one button on one ear will control who you hear. The other button controls the volume. So yours just turned green. Yeah, green is bad. You want red. And one of these controls channels. If we purple, blue, red. So this one will work again. Yeah, one button controls channel, the other one controls volume. People seem to be able to hear me. Well, that's great. Welcome and thank you for coming this afternoon. I want to talk about a chasm or a divide that can really form between the value you need from data and the data you have, and how at times we can use public data to at least bridge that gap or possibly even fill in that whole chasm. You know, to me, it seems very similar to a border rivalry, and I'll mention this a couple times. I'm not a sports guy, but sports analogies really work. You know, I'm a Badger. My daughter is a Gopher. She's at the University of Minnesota. You know, and every year there's this great border rivalry where the two football teams fight for Paul Bunyan's axe. And I'm very happy to say that all but 2 years since 1995, that axe has resided with Bucky Badger in Wisconsin and Camp Randall. You know, similar border rivals exist. You know, for example, between Michigan and Ohio. This is one that started out as a land dispute as to where the state line would be formed. It's grown to the point now where the football rivalry actually manufactures flags that people fly. You need to change to red. Poke a button. So if you don't hear me, poke a button until it's red, and then the other one would be volume. Oh, you're working? Okay. And you know, as we look at these rivalries, it isn't just here. If we go across the pond, these same state-to-state rivalries happen in football there too. But there are opportunities for us. If we don't have the data we need, we can bridge that gap and we can form a cooperative relationship. And you know, if Goldie and Bucky can get along, and no, this is not photoshopped, then we can all get along. And we'll get back to Goldie and Bucky a little bit later as we talk about collaboration among universities. As we talk about my journey with data, I've spent a lot of time working with publicly available data sets, adding value to Grande. Today I'm going to throw a lot of things at you. It's going to move along pretty quickly. Just try to pick up 2 or 3 things that'll help you when you go back to work next week, back in your business. Maybe some ideas about data, possibly biases that'll help you add value using public data to what you're doing. I'm going to talk about making business decisions using public data, a little bit about biases, and I'm going to avoid the epidemiology statistics lecture because it's after lunch and none of us want to sleep right now, and then kind of pull it all together with some visualizations in Tableau that we use at Grande. Grande Cheese was founded 77 years ago when our founder Filippo Candela immigrated from Italy to the United States to bring his cheese-making expertise here. His son John, our chairman, is our current owner. We are Wisconsin-based and have just over 1,000 associates at Grande. Everything we do starts with cows with the milk. We procure milk from about 75,000 cows in Wisconsin. These cows are all on family-owned, managed and operated dairy farms. And these dairy farmers that manage these farms are great adopters of new technology. They live right on the cutting edge, use data to manage their businesses, and we use Tableau to help our dairy farmers manage their business as well as managing our own business. The real focus for our dairy farmers is cow comfort, which translates into milk quality. We take this highest quality milk from our dairy farms and make the finest Italian cheeses money can buy. These cheeses are sold through food service distribution into independent Italian restaurants, the ma-and-pop pizzerias that are in each of your hometowns, and white tablecloth Italian restaurants. We only sell Grande branded cheese, and if you were to look at our label, we don't retail, you can't grab it in the store, but if you see your favorite pizzeria and ask them, there are very few ingredients on our label. We start with pasteurized milk. To the pasteurized milk, we add enzymes which cause the casein proteins in the milk to coagulate, form cheese curds or cheese. And we then have salt as part of our brining system. You know, a very simple recipe to make the finest Italian cheeses money can buy. And we all remember nursery rhymes about Little Miss Muffet sitting in her tuffet, eating her curds and whey. After we knit the proteins in the milk, the caseins, into cheese, what's left over is whey. Whey is primarily liquid. But there are a couple other important ingredients in whey. One is lactose, or milk sugar. It's used in a lot of different confectionaries. It's used as filler in pills for pharmaceuticals. There's also a lot of really great, clean, natural proteins in whey, and these are used as enhancement ingredients in salad dressings and soup mixes, and they're also used in energy bars such as the Gatorade bar we see here. My work at Grande for the last 25 years has really focused on process creation, transformation, and communication. And my job has to do with taking data, turning it into information, knowledge, and ultimately wisdom. And to do that, I use not only data internal to Grande and from our dairy farms, from our 75,000 cows, but also public data to get a more macroeconomic view of what's going on within our business. Today I'm going to talk about sources of data. Where can you find data? Government organizations, non-government organizations, there's industry and commercial data out there. I want to talk a little bit about biases in the data to understand what can be wrong and how to account for that and how to recognize that. A little bit about flexibility needs of different methods of pulling data together from public sources, and some time about the governance of that data, and then look at Tableau and see how do we use this data in Tableau. What I'd like you to do at the end of the day is to ask yourself, how can I use public data to meet my organization's objectives and to exceed expectations? Because we all know that the enemy of good is, the enemy of great, give away the answer, is good. We can't be good, we need to be great at what we do. We need to exceed expectations, and there are opportunities for you to go back to your organization, to your business, and exceed your boss's expectations using public data to augment the data you already have. One thing I like to focus on as data is getting as close to the original source of the data as possible. And I'll use census data as an example. When I need to look at demographics and what's happening within the United States, I go to the US Census and I pull data directly from the US Census rather than getting it from someone else who's reported on that. With census data, you can't always get to individual aggregate data because of confidentiality concerns. We can look at, for example, income data by state, by city, sometimes by zip code or area code. We can't get down to individual household data. If it's your own data, you can get down to that granular level. There's sometimes when you simply can't get to the data from the original source and you need to go to a reported source, something in the media, some sort of an aggregator, something an analyst has put together. And there are times when these analysts, people like you, add a lot of value to the data. So if you can pull in some of the work that others have done, you may be able to use public data almost at a different level and pull in some of the analytics that's already been done. There are also commercial services that go out and scrape and compile data. Some of these are public, some are private. There are a lot of different things, and I'll talk about one of those in a little more detail in a bit. As we look at federal government data around the world, great source of information. There are a lot of mandates to publish data. One place I like to start in the US is data.gov. Data.gov is not an original source. It's United States government data. You can go there, you can search, you can filter, and you can pull data sets out in Excel or in text delimited files, dump them right into Excel or into Tableau and do some work. One of the things to be aware of is these might be incomplete data sets, or they might not be the latest version. But government data.gov does a really good job of pointing you at the original source, so you can go to the website for whatever organization within the government is actually publishing the data, work your way through and find this data. Similar data sources available, the open portal in the EU, something that might be of value soon for those of you who pulled European data in. Data.gov.uk is now in beta. As Brexit happens, this may become more important. Open data in Canada, and there's similar services in Mexico if you're looking at all of North American data. There's a lot of data available from non-government organizations, and almost no matter what industry you're in, there is data available that can help you. One of the things that we have to do is know the source of the data. When we start looking at data from federal governments, we can ask ourselves, are all governments equally trustable? Are China and the US equally trustable as federal governments? Are there biases? Are there different in collection methodologies? Is there censoring going on either or both sides that is different? So if we try to pull that data together, we're getting different results for what looks like it should be the same data. a lot of the data we look at that's publicly available are time series data. So we're looking at series over time, pulling that back to our business, asking ourselves, when are things changing? Is there an inflection point in the data where the market starts to turn, either up or down? As we look at that, can we use those inflection points as a leading indicator for our business? If we're doing that, we have to be very cognizant, not just in the data itself, but how the data collection methodology changes over time. You really don't want to start relying on a data source and say, hey, gee, there's a great inflection point. Look, the economy's changing, make a business decision, only to find out that the economy didn't change, the data didn't change, the collection method did. That's going to happen with EU data here with Brexit. We're looking at the EU 28 as a reporting unit. It's going to be the EU 27 because Great Britain will be gone, unless the European community does something to keep British data in their data collection. Private organizations publish a lot of data. Ask yourself, do they have a mission or agenda? They may, it may be good, but you have to understand there could be bias there. As you look at peer-reviewed data, we've all heard about academia. In academia, we have the mantra of publish or perish. We publish data. As we're publishing data, there are a lot of different opportunities, some better than others. If you're grabbing data from a journal, look at the journal impact factor. Ask yourself, how reliable is the data? How reliable is the source? I'm going to talk about two broad categories of bias. The first one is more of the statistical epidemiological biases, traditional things we have in classrooms, and we'll breeze through those pretty quickly and then conduct a really brief longitudinal study among ourselves. And I want to talk a little bit about biases that can happen as we visualize data. Confirmation bias. George Orwell said in 1984, the best books are those that tell us what we already know. We need to make sure we don't fall into the bias of searching out data that tells us what we want to know rather than looking at the big picture. So as we talk about sampling bias, I said before I don't know a whole lot about sports, but I do know the difference between football and golf. And the difference is that footballs are larger than golf balls. And there's no bias at all here. I also know the difference between a golfer and a football player. Brett is a golfer. I can tell Brett is a golfer because he's carrying a golf club. Ted is a football player. He's about to kick a football and he's my son, so I know he's a football player. Now, if the NFL had only two teams, we're going to do a longitudinal study here, and I'm going to ask anyone who thinks that the Bears are the better of the two teams here to raise their hand, and I'm not doing anything to influence the audience in any way. Now, anyone think the Packers are the better team? Raise your hand. Now, all those Packer fans, keep your hands in the air. We need our hands in the air. We're going to ask about the greatest quarterback of all time. If you think it's the guy on the left named Brett, keep your hand up. Otherwise, put your hands down. There we have it. We have empirical proof through a longitudinal study with absolutely no bias. The greatest quarterback of all time is a golfer. Another bias we need to be aware of in data is an informational bias. As we look at data, we need to know, is that data specific and is it accurate? Especially when we're working with someone else's data. And here in the center of the bullseye, we have two groups of data, one in blue, one in orange, that are both accurate. They're both hitting the bullseye. One is very specific, it's tightly grouped, the other isn't. If there was actually an athletic event that created this, I'd be the guy out here in red, in red, and red. I'm not specific or accurate. Other data points might be very accurate, but not really precise. They're not on the bullseye. As we look at biases in the data, if you understand what they are, you don't want to assign very specific measures to something that really isn't accurate. But if something, isn't precise, if something is accurate, you can adjust the data to make it more precise. If you know that the data is always 10% less than reality, you can add 10% to it and come back to reality. Surveillance bias is a type of bias where the more we look for something, the better we get at finding it. And recall bias, we tend to remember exceptions. How many people remember where they were on September 11th, 2001? We remember where something major happened today. Go back, 11 months before that. Go back to October 10th, 2000. Anybody remember where they were October 10th, 2000? Remember anything that happened that day? There was a terrorist attack that day, a bombing on the USS Cole. We don't remember that quite as well as 9/11. Do you remember what you ate at your wedding reception, your best friend's wedding reception, your brother or sister's wedding reception? These events tag things to us. Different events help us remember things, affect our ability to recall, add bias. I don't remember what I ate 3 weeks ago last Tuesday, but I know it was served at my wedding 31 years ago. We can also create biases or add biases as we create visualizations using this same public data. Confirmation bias, we're more likely to find things that help us with what we already believe. The boss comes to you, you're working on a strategic long-range plan, he says, here are your projections, show me using data that's not ours that this is right. Okay, so I go out and I find data that confirms what I already believe. We really don't want to be one of Dogbert's consultants. We also have a tendency to see what we expect to see. Again, if we see a data set, we'll pull the data together, we visualize it, it doesn't show what we want, maybe we just revisualize it until it does. We know that all data comes at a cost. Free data has extra costs. It requires additional preparation, additional care, looking at biases. Could be some issues in how we join that data, either to other pieces of public data, to our own data. There are a lot of tools out there. Tableau Prep is one. There are others, vendors here that have great tools to help us pull data together from disparate sources. We need to attribute sources. It's always important, especially with public data, so people know where you're coming from. And as I mentioned before, we need to be skeptical of what's happening. As far as attributing sources, Charles M. Schultz said it very well with Charlie Brown. Be just a little bit skeptical. I like to talk about a pyramid of data access as we look at public data. There's some really easy things we can do on the bottom of the pyramid that may not be really functional but will work. There are other things that take a lot of effort on the top of the pyramid but could add some great functionality to what we're doing. We can go out to the web, we can find data, we can copy and paste it, we can key it. Really easy to do for those one and done evaluations. Maybe we can download Datasets. Download a dataset, put together a visualization, publish it. Anytime we want to update it, somebody has to go grab that data again, go through the whole process. Takes a lot of labor, it's a little better than copying and pasting, but not a whole lot. We could also link to data that's available or use an API if one is published. Takes a little bit more technology, a little bit more work, but it's more stable. And at the top of the pyramid, the pinnacle would be to create a custom solution. And I'm going to talk a little bit about a custom solution we use at Grande through understanding dairy markets. Understanding dairy markets is another one of those bridging projects, collaboration between Dr. Brian Gould, who's an agriculture and applied economist at the University of Wisconsin, and Dr. Maren Bozic, who's an applied economist at the University of Minnesota. They have a project that's been going on for about 25 years now that has the goal of having every piece of publicly related, dairy-related data in a single database within seconds of publication around the world. And as they talk about dairy data, we talk about things like number of cows milking in Wisconsin or New York last month, cheese stocks in federal government storage. Brent crude futures are dairy-related data. Brent crude prices drive diesel fuel prices. Dairy products move around the country and around the world using diesel fuel. U.S. Census data and new housing starts are dairy related because they're leading indicators of dairy demand as population shifts. Understanding dairy markets sources data only from original sources, and they do a great job at this. Some are easy. United States Department of Agriculture has a new API called Mars, where you can pull in with a single API script, JavaScript of about 50 lines of code, you can pull in thousands of different time series data. Pulling information from third world countries is a whole lot more difficult. From Grande's perspective, partnering with the two universities is great because they do the work. There's a small number of APIs within the university data set, and there's another great advantage for me, not so much for all of Grande, where we have just these small number of APIs, depending on whether data is available daily, weekly, monthly, or annually. Our BI department has taken this data from the university, replicated it into our data warehouse, and then created views that I can use as an analyst, so I don't have to know anything about the structure of the underlying data. I have to understand the data, I have to understand its use, but the structure is all taken care of by our BI department. If there's a new piece of data I want, and next month we're going to start to get dairy production results from Brazil and Russia. All I have to do is go to the university's website, check off the data series I want, make sure our BI department knows about it, and the next day they're in our data warehouse. It's seamless to me, it's really great. It's that top of the pyramid solution. It takes a lot of work from their standpoint, but it's easy for me as an analyst. Their database has all the things we'd expect in a great database, your revision history, soft deletes, And the model they're using and have been using for 25 years that they're calling Understanding Dairy Markets, UDM, just happens to be exactly the same as the unified dimensional model that Microsoft is using. Same initials, same model. You know, one's 25 years old, one is new now. Data comes in from relational databases, it's scraped from different documents, it's pulled in from the cloud, into the University of Minnesota, Grande's Data Mart, out through Tableau to our client tools so our users can see the data, see the visualizations, and pull that together with their own data. One thing that's unique about the data set that's created, and if you work with a collaborator to do this, you might want to think about this, within the data model, there is only one measure. It happens to be called value. It could be the price of crude oil, it could be the number of cows or production per cow milking somewhere. There's only one measure of the value, and around that a whole bunch of dimensional tables. You know, one example, the report table tells us about the context of the report, explanation, usage. One table I didn't put out here, there's actually a translation table because the databases are available first in the native language where they're published and then translated into a couple of languages that are more used, specifically English, which helps me, and Spanish, which is used by a lot of others. Just going to bop into a look at a couple different Tableau visualizations that we've put together at Grande that have really helped us with public data. And I'd like to thank Jeffrey Schaefer for a couple of the ideas that came out on this one. Jeffrey's here this week, go see his presentations. He's one of the co-authors of the big book of dashboards. Great read if you haven't read it, or go out to the website and, like he says, steal like an artist and steal his ideas. The Chicago Mercantile Exchange has a daily cash trade of dairy products, specifically cheese, butter, and dry products. What's most important to our users at Grande are the block and barrel cheese prices and butter prices. So these are positioned in the top 1/3 of the dashboard in big angry numbers, making it easier for people to find as soon as they open the dashboard the latest prices and exactly what they need. Because of the way the data is set up within Tableau, things are really easy to write. We put on a quick filter to get the data we want for whatever report period is, drag a couple pills in, everything appears in Tableau. Each month, the milk production report is released by USDA. They just released it on Friday. As that happened, dairy economists around the world scramble to go to USDA, grab their PDFs, grab their text files, dump things into Excel, put a map over it, write up a quick analysis, and publish it. As that data is being published, it takes about 2 seconds for that data to be in the University of Minnesota, back into Grande's data warehouse, and our Tableau workbooks are up to date. I don't have to do anything. Anyone at Grande or our dairy producers can go out, grab the latest visualization, and one of the things that we get by housing the data in-house rather than having to scrape individual pieces each month is that we're able to let producers choose states, let them interact, and show things over time. Here we're showing changes in the number of cows and total milk production since the 1930s. Probably not a whole lot of meaning looking back that far, but our users can select any time frame they want to analyze what's going on within the markets. I like to talk a little bit about the Lord of the Rings and one visualization to rule them all. I have a visualization that we put together using the same data set, the same single value that was number of cows and pounds of milk per cow in the last visualization is the amount of milk produced compared to a year ago for all different countries around the world. And in this case, we call them 9 countries. One of them is the EU 28, which is really 28 countries that combine together. The EU is the largest milk producer in the world. As we look at this, again, because of the way the data is formatted, it makes it really easy to do things. A couple quick filters, bring the data I want in. The table calculation here was a quick table calculation with 2 clicks after that to say I want month over month, not year over year. And I put the name of the country on color. One of the things you'll notice that the scale here is in millions of pounds of milk per day. Now, any of you who aren't from the US are thinking millions of pounds of milk per day. That doesn't sound like a normal measure, a normal units. As we looked at this table, this star schema, there was a units table. Within the database, we have a units column in the query I use. So I can very quickly in Tableau say, if the units are millions of pounds, then I'm probably in the US. I'll just use value, divide by pounds per day, because I like to take into account leap year. If I'm somewhere else and it's 1,000 metric tons, which tends to be the case in South America, then I can adjust value to convert thousands of metric tons into pounds. If it's thousands of liters or millions of liters, similarly I just need to convert those to the correct units. Setting up your dimensions ahead of time to identify units is really nice. The other thing I can do, this is based on the specific gravity of milk in this particular visualization, so it wouldn't work for converting fuel oil or water from different units. But anything I want to do with milk, I can use this same calculation to convert the units so my units are all the same wherever I am. Each month, the USDA publishes a lot of dairy prices, or a whole bunch of series, and we have a workbook that has 6 dashboards in it. This is one looking at some important milk prices, class 3 and 4, which is cheese and dry products milk, and the difference between those. Again, simple to put together in Tableau. Like I said, we have 6 different dashboards in the workbook. There are about 60 different measures in the USDA report. I couldn't create a dashboard or a workbook that has 60 dashboards. It'd be overwhelming, it'd be hard to use, it'd be confusing. But because the data is set up with just a single measure and all these dimensions around it, I can create a dashboard where I'm filtering on name, or the name of the line item within a report. Let the users see that name, and I have 50 different visualizations within one dashboard. So as you're setting these up, if you have questions about how to set these up, feel free to contact me, contact either of the professors. Myron Bozic is probably the best one, because Brian Gould in Madison just became a professor emeritus, so he's sitting a little bit on the sidelines. Another great win for Grande, starting a little over 25 years ago, we started to track dry dairy products, whey prices, lactose prices, et cetera, on a weekly basis. So every week for the last 25 or so years, someone has opened up an Excel spreadsheet, gotten market prices, and keyed in all these market prices. When I started with Grande, we were receiving letters in the mail from USDA. Someone would open up the letter, find the prices, and key them into Excel. Recently, they were keying them in from the web. It takes time. USDA revises prices from time to time. It seems like every week they're revising something, and we didn't always catch the revisions, so our data wasn't perfect. Because of the way the universities tie into USDA, the revisions flow through automatically. Now at Grande, no one needs to key any of this data. It all dumps into our data warehouse. There are visualizations over in Tableau. And rather than these giant Excel spreadsheets with canned charts, which looked great 25 years ago and now start to get kind of cluttered, our users can use Tableau and they can do what they need to do with this data. We also have some visualizations in this same workbook that pull this data together with Grande data. So we're pulling public data and Grande data together to help us with our pricing and with our commodity shifts. Thrown a lot of things at you today. What I'd really like you to take home is that you can use public data to augment and to grow your business. Public data has value. It can have impact on your business. Almost no matter what you're doing, there is data publicly available. Get as close to the original source as you can. Each step you get away from the original source can add bias to what's happening. Beware of long-term costs and values. One of the things that we have at Grande with the success we've had with some of these projects is we go forward and ask for more from the executive team and say, we've done this, we want to do this. And they say, well, that's going to cost time, that's going to have real costs. And we say, yep, we tracked what we've saved in each of these products. And we have individual reports that are saving hours of time each week or even each day. And when you can go back with that and say, yeah, our analysts now are no longer keying data, they're adding value to data. You've added value to the company, value to the bottom line, which really helps as you propose projects going forward. Be aware of biases, those in the data and those you create, and go home next week. Go on Monday and ask yourself, how can I use public data to help? How can I turn good into great? Connect with your local Tableau users group. There are others there who are using different data sources, those you're not familiar with. And lastly, email and collaborate. Please take time, grab your phone, grab the app, review the session, let everybody at Tableau know what you think, and any value you had out of it really helps them as they organized this conference last year. And lastly, thank you. And if you have questions, I'll stick around.